Chairman, thank you, Doctor, for being here today. My former profession was working with students and kids. Traveled to hundreds and hundreds of high schools across the country in all 50 states, ate at lunchrooms, and the food in most of them were atrocious. 2010, we basically did away with milk for some reason. I can't imagine. I've got a new granddaughter. My daughter-in-law is breastfeeding. We looked at the formula that we could have been feeding my new granddaughter. We want to do away with something, we do away with that because it's nothing but sugar. And we're going to look at something that's so important to our kids growing up and their physical attributes of growing up to an adult. We're looking at possibility of milk being detrimental. It's mind-boggling to me, but I guess there's a lot more smarter people than me. You know, I used to have a training table for players. All of our athletes, and you could put milk and you could put tea, you could put water out there, they'd drink the milk. Athletes. And there's a reason that they look a lot better than a lot of our kids nowadays. But at the end of the day, we have to make a decision, what's better? I can't believe we're even getting involved in this, but science improves and changes over time. We know that. Our nutrition standards should not be what they were in 2010. They have to change. As nutrition science data has changed, can you discuss the 2005 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee's conclusions on dairy consumption's effect on children?
And just to clarify, just to make sure I heard you correctly, you were referencing the 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee did an extensive review. They are convened as an external advisory committee, and the 2025 committee had 20 members. They did an extensive review on all aspects of the diet, including dairy, data analysis, a number of systematic reviews, and food pattern modeling. At the end of the day, they looked at a lot of new evidence. There is evidence that's looking at food sources of saturated fat, so dairy that has different amounts of saturated fat, these different types that are exactly the conversation today. They also did a number of food pattern modeling analyses to look, and what that does is looks to what happens if you change the amount of dairy in a pattern. At the end of the day, they found that you can't reduce the amount of dairy in a dietary pattern, that the amount that's recommended still holds, and that's in large part because of all the nutrients that dairy provides. It's a good source and the major source of calcium, vitamin D, and about a dozen other nutrients in the diet. At the end of the day, there are recommendations to the departments, and I'll note that that's advice to the departments for informing the next edition of the dietary guidelines, but their advice was to maintain the current guidance. Now, we are at a point, and Secretaries Rollins and Kennedy have acknowledged their commitment to supporting the development of the dietary guidelines to be released later this year, and they have also discussed doing a line-by-line review of the committee's report and basing the next edition of the dietary guidelines on science. So there will, I expect, be a lot more discussion related to the topic of dairy as well as other aspects of the diet. But at the end of the day, I think the 2025 committee continued to emphasize the importance of dairy in a healthy dietary pattern.
So at the end of the day, don't you agree that any milk, 2%, whole milk, is much better for our kids growing up than soda?
Yes. I think the point of the dietary guidelines is that there is flexibility. There's a number of different options within the dairy food group, and whether that be fat-free, low-fat, reduced-fat whole milk, it's important to make selections that are right, that support individual needs and preferences, and in that context of the larger dietary pattern.
Thank you.
Senator Bennett.